There is a specific kind of grief that never announces itself. It doesn't arrive on the night someone walks out the door. It doesn't arrive at the funeral, or at the lawyer's office, or at the bottom of the first bottle of wine you drink alone after years of drinking beside someone else. It arrives later, quietly, without ceremony. On an ordinary Tuesday, when you're folding laundry and you realize you can no longer remember what it felt like to be chosen. You know that feeling, not as a concept, as a lived physical fact, the specific weight of a life that functions perfectly and means very little. You have been carrying that weight for longer than you have admitted to anyone, including yourself. That is where Amara was when the phone rang, 34 years old. A small apartment in a city that never learned her name. There's a job she was good at but did not love. A life that worked the way a clock works after you remove the bell. Accurately, but without any sound that matters. She had not always been this quiet inside. There was a version of Amara, and if you have ever loved someone so completely that you forgot where they ended and you began, you already know this version. There was a version of her that was incandescent. The kind of woman who laughed first and loudest, who kept a journal full of plans, who believed, with the specific and devastating certainty of someone who has not yet been truly disappointed, that the life she could see in her imagination was the life she was walking toward. That version of Amara fell in love with Dominic Ashworth when she was 26, and everything that happened after, the 8 years, the promises, the slowly tightening silences, the morning he left without a note, the decade she spent rebuilding herself from materials she didn't choose, all of it leads here. To a phone call she didn't expect, to a name she had almost succeeded in forgetting, to an offer that, on paper, should have been everything. You know that secret, midnight fantasy, the one you have never said out loud, the one where someone who has the power to fix everything just fixes it, steps in, says, I have this. Let me carry it. You have been carrying your own life on your back for so long that the fantasy of being rescued doesn't even feel like weakness anymore. It feels like survival. Stay with this story. Because what Amara discovers in that restaurant, about the offer, about Dominic, and about herself, is the thing most people spend their entire lives circling without ever landing. And it will explain something about your own life that you have not had the language for yet. She almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved. It never is with the people who matter most. You delete them in a moment of clarity and then spend months half hoping they'll call anyway, just so you can prove to yourself that you've moved on. The phone rang 4 times. She picked it up on the 5th. Amara. One word. Her name. And 8 years collapsed like a building that had been waiting for the right vibration to fall. Dominic Ashworth's voice had not changed. That was the first thing. That specific warmth, that unhurried way he said her name, it was exactly as she had stored it, which meant her memory had been accurate, which meant the loss had been exactly as real as she had always privately known. I need to see you, he said. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'm asking. She should have said no. Every version of herself that had survived the last 8 years knew the answer was no. She said, when? You understand why she said yes. Don't pretend you don't. Because you have done the same thing. Maybe not with a billionaire. Maybe with a text message from someone who should have stayed blocked. Maybe with a conversation you agreed to that you knew, before it started, would cost you something. You said yes because the pull of being known, truly known, by someone who has seen the specific interior of your life is stronger than almost any boundary you have ever tried to hold. That pull is not weakness. It is the most human thing about you. But there is a catch buried inside that pull. A catch you have fallen for before, in smaller ways, without ever fully seeing what it was taking from you. To understand the offer Amara was about to receive and why she ultimately refused it, you first need to understand the villain in this story. And the villain is not Dominic. The villain is the script, the one you were handed before you were old enough to question it. The media script, the childhood fairy tale, the cultural conditioning that taught you the ultimate expression of love is being saved. We are raised inside a story where the highest form of devotion is someone sweeping in and solving your external reality, where resources equal love, where the grand gesture is the proof. That script sets an impossible standard, and it distorts everything. Because beneath that romantic narrative lives something far more insidious, an attachment pattern formed long before you had any choice in the matter. A pattern that turns offers of love into threats and turns rescuers into wardens without either person ever understanding what is happening. The restaurant was not the kind of place Amara chose for herself. Dominic was different, and he was the same, and both of those things were weapons. Quieter than she remembered, stiller. The kind of stillness that comes from moving very fast for a very long time and finally deciding to stop. His suit cost more than a month of her rent. His watch was the kind you see in magazines you read in waiting rooms. They talked about nothing for 11 minutes. She counted. You count things when you are nervous and trying to look like you are not nervous. Then he set down his glass and looked at her the way he used to, directly, without apology. And he said, "I've thought about you every day for 8 years." She did not say, "So have I." She did not say, "There were mornings I couldn't get up because of the specific weight of your absence." She said, "Why are you here, Dominic?" And he slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a deed, a property in the south of France, a house she had described to him once at 27, lying in the dark, the way you describe impossible things to the person you trust most. Stone walls, a garden facing the sea, a writing room full of morning light. She had told him about that house once. He had remembered. For 8 years he had remembered, and then he had found it and bought it. And now he was handing it back to her. The dream she had described in the dark, the one she had quietly stopped believing in, the one life had taken. "Come back to me," he said. "I have everything we would have needed then. The house, the stability, the time. I'm ready now. I was never ready before, and I'm telling you, I am ready now." And here is what the room felt like in that moment. Like standing at the edge of water you have been thirsty for a decade. Like the answer arriving so completely, you almost cannot locate the question anymore. Like the specific vertigo of something you had given up on reappearing, whole, glittering, within reach. You have felt this, maybe not with a deed to a house in France, but you have felt the vertigo of an old want reappearing in a new form. And you know how intoxicating it is. How it bypasses every rational thought you have ever had and goes straight to the part of you that is still, underneath everything, waiting to be chosen. Turning that down goes against every biological survival instinct you possess. When your nervous system is exhausted, the offer of safety is not just appealing, it is almost physically irresistible. Which means the reason Amara walked away had to be stronger than her instinct to survive. If you have ever felt the anger of realizing the fairy tale you were raised on completely failed to prepare you for the psychological reality of love, that specific frustration of wanting connection so badly and still feeling trapped every time it arrives, that feeling is worth something. It means you are paying attention at a level most people never reach. She did not refuse him that night. She said she needed time. She drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat and every version of herself she had ever been somewhere in the car. She drove past her exit twice because she was not ready to stop moving. Inside her apartment, she sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope again. The deed was real. The address was in a village 40 minutes from Marseille. She put it down. She picked up the journal she had kept since the year after he left. The one she had begun, the way you begin things when you are trying to prove to yourself that you are still capable of beginning things. She read the first entry. I don't know who I am without him yet. I'm going to find out. She read forward. The promotion she expected to feel empty that didn't. The solo trip to Portugal she was terrified to take. The wedding toast that made the whole room cry. The morning she woke up and realized she had slept all the way through the night and lay there for a long time understanding that the silence had become hers. She read all the way to the last entry. And then she understood. Now here is where most relationship content gives you the surface answer. It tells you she walked away because she wanted to be self-made, because she needed to maintain her independence, because she had healthy boundaries. That is the false resolution. That is the comfortable version that lets you feel good without actually understanding anything. She did not walk away because she wanted to earn it back herself. She walked away because she realized that if he gave her back her past, she would owe him her future. There is a framework for what Dominic was doing, whether he understood it or not. When a partner uses overwhelming resources to solve a core wound you have not resolved yourself, they create what could be called an architecture of transactional emotional debt, an unpayable one. You can never just be angry at someone who saved you. You can never simply disagree with them. Because every time you try to assert your own needs, the ghost of their massive sacrifice enters the room. The house in France becomes the invisible ceiling of every argument you will ever have. The deed becomes the answer to every complaint you might raise. You cannot be fully yourself inside a life someone else purchased for you. He was not offering her a home. He was offering to be the architect of her redemption. And the person who architects your redemption owns the blueprints. Save this, specifically for the moment, and it will come. When someone makes you an offer that feels like love, but costs you something you cannot name yet. When you feel yourself shrinking under the weight of someone else's generosity. When a gesture so large arrives that refusing it feels ungrateful, and accepting it feels like surrender. You will want this framework in the room with you. Your saved videos are in your library waiting. Now look at Dominic's side of this honestly. Why do powerful people seek out partners they can rescue? It is not purely generosity. Rescuing someone is one of the most effective defense mechanisms against real vulnerability that exists. If I am saving you, I never have to show you my wounds. If I am the provider of miracles, you will never look closely enough to see that I am emotionally unavailable at my core. He bought back her dream because it was easier than offering her who he actually was. The gesture, tracking down the exact property she had described in the dark, purchasing it, presenting it across a restaurant table, required enormous resources and almost no emotional courage. It required his checkbook, not his interior life. And that asymmetry is the tell. To look at another person's grief and decide your wealth is a sufficient cure for it. That requires a fundamental failure to respect the other person's process of becoming. You have been in this dynamic. Maybe not at this scale, but you have been in a situation where someone did something overwhelming for you, and instead of feeling loved, you felt like a prop in their story about what a good partner they are. You felt the subtle but suffocating weight of their narrative about you. You felt seen and simultaneously reduced. That is not love. That is curation. When she slid the envelope back across the table, she was not rejecting his money. She was rejecting his definition of her. This is where you have to look at yourself honestly. You probably pride yourself on independence. You tell people you do not need anyone, but that independence is not strength, is it? Your fierce self-reliance is a trauma response. You do not avoid help because you are extraordinarily capable. You avoid help because somewhere in your past, accepting help came with conditions that cost you something essential. You learned that when people give you things, they own a piece of you. And so, when someone offers you something massive, even something you desperately want, your nervous system does not register it as a gift. It registers it as a threat. You have been building walls so high and so carefully that nobody gets in. And then, when someone tries, when someone actually shows up with the capacity to meet your needs, you feel a specific, terrifying dissonance. You tell yourself they are doing it wrong. Too much, not enough, just not right. But the truth at the identity level, the truth you have been circling without landing, is that you are afraid of being perceived as someone who needs anything. You built your entire identity around being the one who survives. If someone removes the struggle, you don't know who you are anymore. You have been rejecting love because it doesn't look like the struggle you are used to. Now you keep choosing situations that are slightly unavailable, slightly withholding, because that feels like home. And when something genuinely consistent appears, when someone actually shows up, you manufacture a reason to leave. Not out of cruelty, out of terror. She called him the next morning. She let herself sleep first, which felt important, which felt like an act of self-possession. She made coffee. She watched the city move. Then she called. He answered before the second ring. "I've thought about your offer," she said. "I know it's a lot. It's not too much. That's not the problem." She held the coffee cup with both hands. "The problem is that you built it for the woman I was, and I'm not her anymore." Silence. The woman who described that house was trying to find a way out of a life that was slowly making her smaller. And I spent 8 years building a life that doesn't make me smaller. It's not the life I described in the dark. It's better. Because it's actually mine. He was quiet for a long time. "I wanted to fix it," he said. "I know." She set down the cup. "And I think somewhere underneath the fixing, you wanted to know that I was okay. That what happened didn't break something in me permanently." Did it? She thought about this honestly. "For a while," she said. "For a long while. And then it didn't." Here is the sentence she said to him that dismantles the entire savior fantasy. She said, "You cannot buy back a ghost." The house was timber and glass. The safety she lost years ago could not be handed back in a manila envelope. Safety is not a place you live. It is a capacity you build inside your own nervous system. And nobody can build it for you, because if they build it, they own it. And you are back in the same room, just with a different warden. You cannot be rescued from a room you locked yourself inside. If someone kicks the door down, you are still a prisoner. The only way to be free is to unlock the door yourself, walk out, and meet someone in the hallway as an equal. Not as a rescued person and their rescuer. Not as a wound and its cure. As two people who chose each other from wholeness rather than from need. That is the thing no one tells you about healing. It does not look like the rescue you imagined. It does not arrive in an envelope across a restaurant table from someone who remembered your dream. It looks like an ordinary Tuesday when you realize the silence has become yours. It looks like a blank journal page. It looks like beginning something that has no shape yet because you have not arrived at it. He came back with everything. She just no longer needed any of it. Sit with that for a moment, because the distance between needing something and having outgrown it, between accepting an offer because it fills a hole and declining it because you have quietly become whole. That distance is the entire journey. And if you are watching this, some part of you already knows which side of that distance you are standing on. There is someone in your life right now going through their own version of this. Someone caught between who they were and who they have become. Someone staring at an envelope they cannot quite refuse and cannot quite accept. Send them this. Not because it has answers, because it has the right questions at the right time. But this story opens something that cannot be resolved here. Because once you stop looking for a rescuer, once you slide the envelope back and walk out and decide to build your own emotional architecture, a new and more uncomfortable question arrives. How do you know if you are genuinely open to real love? How do you tell the difference between healthy self-reliance and the kind of isolation that looks like strength but is just loneliness with better posture? That specific pattern has a deeper layer, and it is the reason people who heal from the savior dynamic often accidentally close themselves off entirely, trading one kind of cage for another. That is what we are going into next. Before you go, drop a comment. Tell me, what is the offer you have been sitting with? The thing someone tried to give you? Or that life tried to hand back to you? That you could not accept, even when part of you desperately wanted to? You do not need to have lived through a billionaire's rescue to know that feeling. Write it out. Read what others say. Because the comments on this story are going to be full of people who finally have language for something they have been carrying quietly for a very long time. And finding that language, even inside someone else's story, is its own kind of coming home.